The 9 choirs of angels. Complete hierarchy explained. Most people imagine angels in the same way. Winged creatures, bright clothes, soft voices, and the role of heavenly guardians. But ancient texts paint a completely different picture. Heaven is described not as a boundless space with identical beings, but as a complex system where each level has its own authority, its own power, and its own function. There is order there, and this order is much larger than it seems. Theologians of the early church spoke of 9 orders of angels, a hierarchy that forms the entire structure of heavenly governance. Some of them stand alongside humans. Others control the forces of nature. Some are so close to the divine presence that the human imagination can hardly describe them. This is not just beautiful symbolism, it is a map of the invisible world. And when you begin to understand this structure, it becomes obvious. Angels are not just guardians. It is a huge system where each level is responsible for a certain aspect of reality. Today we will examine the complete hierarchy of the 9 angelic choirs, from those who accompany human life to those who stand at the very center of heavenly power. And the higher we climb this hierarchy, the more extraordinary these beings become. Why does the hierarchy of angels exist at all? When people first hear about the 9 choirs of angels, they naturally ask, why does heaven need a hierarchy? After all, if angels are spiritual beings, why do they need structure, ranks, and order? This is where the first important principle of ancient theology comes in. Heaven was never described as a chaotic world. On the contrary, it was seen as a perfectly organized system where each level has its own function. Early Christian thinkers, especially the theologian Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, described the angelic world as a kind of hierarchy of light. The divine will is not simply transmitted directly into the universe. It passes through certain levels of spiritual beings who transmit it to lower levels. This resembles a management system, not a military army or a bureaucracy, but rather a chain of transmission of divine order. The higher angels perceive the divine will almost directly. The lower ones carry it out in the world, closer to humans, and that is why angels are divided into 3 great triads. The first triad is those who are closest to humanity. They interact with our world, influence events, and accompany people and nations. The second triad is beings who control the forces of creation. Their sphere is cosmic order, spiritual struggle, and miracles. And the third triad is the most mysterious. These are beings who have almost no direct contact with humanity because they are closest to the divine presence. And this is where it gets interesting, because the lowest level of this heavenly system is the angels that people hear about most often. But even they play a much greater role than is commonly thought. Next, we will begin to ascend this hierarchy from the very first level. Those beings who, according to tradition, are close to every person. So stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. The first triad, closest to the human world. There is an interesting pattern. The closer angels are to people, the more often they are talked about. But at the same time, their role is most often simplified. In the first heavenly triad, there are 3 ranks: angels, archangels, and principles. This is the level of the heavenly hierarchy that directly interacts with human history. And it all starts with the lowest, but at the same time, the closest to humans level. Angels are the guardians of human life. In theological tradition, the word angel means not so much the type of being as its function. Translated from Greek, it means messenger. These are the beings that interact most closely with humans. They are traditionally called guardian angels. Their role is not to control world history or change the fate of humanity. Their mission is much more specific, to accompany a particular life. Ancient texts describe them as those who protect people, guide their decisions, sometimes intervene at critical moments in life. And although modern culture often depicts them almost as symbols of kindness, early sources speak of them in a much more serious way. They are the first level of the heavenly order through which the spiritual world touches human life. But above them stands another order, much more powerful. Archangels are the commanders of heavenly missions. Archangels are no longer just messengers. They are the leaders of heavenly operations. Their appearance in history is almost always associated with large-scale events. It is the archangels in biblical texts who bring the most important messages, intervene at turning points in history, and lead the heavenly forces. The most famous of them are Michael, warrior and defender; Gabriel, herald of great events; Raphael, angel of healing. In many traditions, archangels are described as strategists of the heavenly world. They do not accompany one person. Their sphere is great events, the fate of nations, spiritual battles. But even they do not control everything, because there is another rank above the archangels, the principals, defenders of nations. The third level of the first triad is called the principals. Their function is almost never shown in popular culture, but it is extremely important. These beings are responsible for entire communities of people, cities, nations, countries, large historical structures. Ancient texts hint that every nation has a spiritual patron. It is the beginnings who ensure that historical processes do not deviate from the spiritual order. And they can be imagined as angels who are the guardians of civilizations. They do not appear to individuals. Their work takes place on the scale of entire generations. And it is at this level that an important fact begins to unfold. The angelic world is not just spiritual beings. It is a full-fledged system of reality management. But the first triad is only the beginning, because above them stands another group of beings, much more powerful, and their role is no longer limited to humans. They are responsible for the very structure of the universe. The second triad: those who control the forces of creation. As you rise higher in the angelic hierarchy, one important thing changes. These beings hardly interact with humans directly. Their sphere is not human destinies. Their sphere is the order of the world itself. In theological tradition, the second triad includes three orders: powers, virtues, and dominions. This is the level where angels perform not local, but cosmic functions. Powers, guardians of the boundaries between worlds. The order of powers is described in ancient texts as a spiritual army. Their task is to maintain the balance between the forces of light and darkness. Theologians often describe them as heavenly guardians who control spiritual boundaries. If we imagine the heavenly system as a huge state, then the powers are those who stand at its borders. They restrain chaos. They oppose demonic forces. They do not allow spiritual conflicts to destroy the order of creation. In many ancient descriptions, these angels are depicted as warriors, not symbolic ones, but real defenders of cosmic order. That is why they are often associated with the spiritual struggle mentioned in biblical texts. But even these heavenly warriors are not the ones who perform miracles. This role is performed by another order: the powers, angels of miracles. The next level of the second triad is called the powers. In theology, they are often described as those through whom miracles enter the world. This is not just a beautiful phrase. In medieval theology, it was believed that it was the powers that transmitted supernatural energy into the world, allowing events to occur that went beyond the ordinary laws of nature. Their action is almost imperceptible, but the consequences are enormous. Unexpected victories, incredible rescues, situations where events unfold as if reality itself has suddenly changed direction. Many of the miracles described in spiritual texts were attributed to the activities of the forces, but even they are not at the top of this triad. Above them is the order responsible for managing the entire system. Dominions, administrators of the heavenly order. The order of dominions occupies the highest position in the second triad. They are rarely mentioned in popular culture, but in theology their role is considered one of the most important. These are angels who coordinate the work of lower orders. They do not simply carry out tasks, they convey orders. It is the dominions who form the management structure between the heavenly levels. They can be imagined as those who distribute spiritual missions, coordinate the activities of other angels, maintain order in the vast heavenly system. They are not warriors, nor are they messengers. They are the leaders of the heavenly administration, and at this level, it becomes clear the hierarchy of angels is not a symbol. It is a complex system where each level plays its role. But even this triad is not the highest. Above them all stands another group of beings. And this is where the most mysterious part of the angelic hierarchy begins. Because the following beings are so distant from the human world that their descriptions are almost beyond human imagination. The third triad, closest to the divine presence. The higher you climb the angelic hierarchy, the less human these beings become. Lower angels sometimes appear to humans. They are described as messengers, warriors, or guides. But the beings of the third triad, Dehati, almost never interact with humanity directly. They are on a completely different level. Their existence is not connected with people, history, or even the cosmos. They are connected directly with the divine presence. The third triad contains the three highest angelic ranks: thrones, cherubim, and seraphim. Each of them performs a role that is difficult to imagine in human terms. Thrones, the embodiment of divine justice. The order of thrones is described in ancient texts as one of the most mysterious. They are sometimes called Ophanim, wheels. In the biblical visions of the prophets, these beings are described as fiery wheels, covered with countless eyes. This is not a symbolic image. In theology, it was believed that thrones personify the very principle of divine justice. They do not carry out orders. They do not interfere in human affairs. Their role is to be the spiritual foundation of justice through which the divine order manifests itself in the universe. That is why their image is so unusual. They do not have a familiar form. They are the moving structure of divine judgment. But even these beings do not stand at the top of the heavenly hierarchy. Above them are those who guard the deepest secrets of creation. Cherubim are the guardians of knowledge. Cherubim are often misrepresented in modern culture. They are depicted as small winged children, but ancient texts describe them quite differently. Cherubim are the guardians of sacred knowledge. In biblical tradition, they stood at the entrance to the Garden of Eden after the expulsion of man. They do not allow access to what man is not yet ready to understand. Their images in prophetic vision seem almost impossible for the human imagination. Multiple faces, numerous wings, countless eyes. These symbols have one purpose: to show that cherubim represent the fullness of knowledge and observation. They see what is hidden. They guard what should not be revealed prematurely. But even they do not occupy the highest level. For above all the angelic ranks stand beings who are considered closest to the divine source. Seraphim are the fire of heaven. At the top of the entire hierarchy are the seraphim. Their name translates as those who burn. In biblical descriptions, they have 6 wings. 2 cover their faces, 2 cover their feet, and with 2 they fly. But that is not the most important thing. Seraphim symbolize pure divine love. In theology, they are considered the beings closest to God. Their role is to continuously glorify and support the spiritual flame of creation. They do not carry out orders. They are at the very center of the divine presence. And that is why Their image is associated with fire, not destructive, but purifying. But when you look at this whole hierarchy together, an important question arises. If the heavenly world has such a complex structure, what this hierarchy means for humans? When you look at this whole structure together, an important realization emerges. Heaven does not look like a world of random beings. It is a system. Clear, orderly, built on the principle of transmitting light from the highest level to the lowest. Seraphim are at the very source of the divine presence. Cherubim guard knowledge. Thrones embody justice. Dominions rule over angelic orders. Powers transmit miracles. Authorities restrain chaos. Principles are responsible for nations. Archangels carry out great heavenly missions. And only at the very end of this chain are those whom humans can feel closest to. Angels. That is why spiritual tradition speaks of one important idea. Humans are not isolated from the heavenly world. They are at the lowest level of a great system that begins at the very source of divine reality. And this system works like a stream. Divine will is transmitted through the higher levels of angels, then through the middle ones, then through those who are closest to the human world. And finally, it touches human life. That is why in ancient texts, angels are never described as separate, random beings. They are part of the cosmic order, and the deeper you understand this structure, the more obvious one thing becomes. The world in which humans live is much larger than what can be seen. And perhaps the most interesting thing is not even the angels themselves. It is that this hierarchy hints at something much deeper. That the universe is built on the principle of spiritual order, where each level has its own role. And if this system really exists, then another question arises. Can humans ever understand more about the world that lies above them?